Hey there, come closer to the fire for a moment. There is a blue gate in the dark, and on that gate a dragon is standing so still that it almost feels less like a beast than a warning that learned how to breathe. It has the neck of a serpent, the forelegs of a lion, the talons of a bird, and a horned head lifted as if it has been watching kings pass beneath it for so long that human ambition has become a very small thing. This is the Mushkhushshu, the dragon of the old Mesopotamian world. And the strange thing is this: it was not placed at the heart of Babylon because people thought dragons made the walls look exciting. It was placed there because fear, when it belongs to a god, can become protection. It can become order. It can become a gatekeeper. If this quiet journey feels like a place you want to return to, please like the video and subscribe. It helps these old stories find other tired minds, and it lets this small corner of the night keep its candles burning. Now let the room grow dim around you. Let the fire settle into its little bed of red light. Let your shoulders lower just a little. Nothing forced. Nothing ceremonial. We are only going back, softly, to a place where cities rose from river mud, where priests listened to omens, where kings built with clay and fear, and where a dragon could stand at the threshold of an empire without anyone thinking the world had become unreasonable. Honestly, I have always found that detail stranger than any legend of flames or treasure. A dragon in a cave is easy. A dragon on a royal gate is different. A cave dragon belongs to a story that wants a hero. A gate dragon belongs to a city that wants obedience, reverence, and the deep feeling that something larger than human hands is holding the walls together. So imagine yourself there, not as a hero, and not as a scholar with clean notes and good lighting, but as a tired traveler arriving near Babylon after days of dust. The land is low and broad. The air smells of baked clay, river water, animal hide, and smoke from cooking fires sinking slowly into evening. Your sandals are whitened with powder from the road. Your mouth tastes faintly of grit. In the distance, the city rises like something the earth has allowed, but has not fully forgiven. There are walls first. There are always walls in such a story. Long lines of brick, heavy with the confidence of kings. Then comes color, a blue so deep that it feels almost wet, though the air is dry. The gate does not whisper. It announces itself without needing to shout. It catches the last light and holds it, glaze by glaze, brick by brick, like pieces of sky that have been fired in a kiln. Your eye knows what to do with some of the animals. The lion, yes. Even if you have never stood close to one, you know enough. The lion means force. The lion means hunger wearing a crown. The bull, yes. The bull means weight, storm, muscle, the power of the field and the God who sends thunder across the plain. But then your gaze reaches the other creature, and the mind slows down. It is long and scaled. It is narrow, but not weak. It has a forward curve in the neck, a posture almost too aware for an animal. The head is horned. The forelegs are strong like those of a great cat, planted with a confidence that makes the brick beneath them feel less like decoration and more like ground. Behind them, the hind legs turn strange, thin and sharp, ending in talons like a bird of prey. The tail continues the body in a sinuous line, as if the serpent has not fully agreed to become anything else. The first mistake would be to say, simply, it is a monster. That word feels satisfying for about one breath, and then it fails. The second mistake would be to say, it is only decoration. That is worse. Really. Ancient states did not spend all that labor, all that pigment, all that fire and royal intention, just to make a wall look lively. The old world knew how images work on the heart. It knew how repetition turns a symbol into weather. It knew how a creature, shown again and again at a threshold, could teach the body to feel small before the mind had time to argue. The Mushkhushshu was there to say something. It said that Babylon was not merely brick. It said that the king did not stand alone. It said that the gods were near, and that the powers most people feared had already been gathered, named, and placed on the proper side of the wall. That is the softer and darker truth of this creature. It is frightening, yes, but not in the simple way of a beast loose in the reeds. It is frightening because it has been accepted into order. It has been given permission to stand beside authority. It is the kind of danger that does not need to chase you, because it has already been invited inside the temple language of the city. The Mesopotamian world was comfortable with such things. We modern people love our tidy shelves. Animal here, God there, king in another place, monster very far away if possible. The cities between the rivers did not always divide reality so neatly. A statue could receive offerings. A dream could carry a message. A star could belong to a god. The movement of a liver, the flight of a bird, the sudden rise of water in a canal, all of these could be read as signs. The visible world was not empty. It was crowded with meaning. So animals were never only animals. A lion was not merely a large cat with a dramatic opinion of itself, though I admit, that is already a respectable description. A bull was not merely a bull. A serpent was not merely a snake. Each creature carried a mood, a threat, a divine echo, a social memory. When an artist combined them, the result was not confusion. It was compression. It was meaning pressed into a body. Look again at the Mushkhushshu, slowly, as if the fire beside us is lighting each feature one at a time. The scales first. They make the creature cold in the imagination, older than fur, less friendly than skin, armored against touch. Scales do not invite the hand. They refuse comfort. They suggest water, mud, hidden cracks in the earth, and creatures that move without asking to be understood. Then the serpent line. A serpent lives close to fear because it appears and disappears with little warning. It enters holes. It emerges from shadow. It can lie still until stillness itself feels suspicious. In many ancient places, snakes were not merely feared. They were respected, watched, connected with renewal, hidden depths, and powers beneath the soil. A serpent sheds its skin and seems to return from itself. That is a quiet miracle, and a disturbing one. Now the lion forelegs. Here the creature gains ground. It is no longer only something that slides or coils. It stands. It claims space. It faces the viewer with the strength of a predator that has no need to explain its rank. The lion was royal long before any king placed a crown on his own head. To give the Mushkhushshu those front limbs is to give it the authority of the hunt, the pressure of muscle, the warning of teeth even when the mouth is closed. Then the bird-like hind legs, and the whole body changes again. Talons belong to seizure. They belong to sudden descent, to the hard certainty of a claw closing around what cannot escape. With those hind legs, the creature is not only earthbound, it borrows something from the sky. Not wings, not flight, but the sharp grammar of birds of prey. It becomes a thing of several realms: earth, air, serpent depth, royal ground. And then the horn. A small detail, perhaps, if you are looking quickly. But in Mesopotamian art, horns are not casual. Horns belong to the divine vocabulary. They mark nearness to gods, sacred status, a charge of power that ordinary animals do not carry. The horn on the Mushkhushshu is not a decoration. It is a sign. It lifts the creature out of mere animal terror and places it near the sacred. This is why the word dragon helps, and also why it misleads. We hear dragon, and we pack the old suitcase at once. Wings, fire, gold, a lonely mountain, a brave young man making poor life choices with a sword. But the Mesopotamian creature is not that. It does not need a cave. It does not need treasure. It does not need a heroic duel to become meaningful. It belongs to a gate, to a god, to a city that understood that power should sometimes look unsettling. There is a kind of wisdom in that, a severe wisdom, but wisdom all the same. Order in the ancient world was never soft by default. Rivers fed the fields, but they could also flood them. Kings protected cities, but they also brought armies. Gods gave life, but they could send storms, plague, drought, silence. To live in Mesopotamia was to understand that survival depended on forces too large to be friendly in any simple way. So the Mushkhushshu stands in the middle of that understanding. It is not chaos running wild. It is chaos held by the collar, if one may say so, though I would not recommend trying that with a divine serpent dragon. It is dangerous power under command. It is fear placed where it can guard instead of wander. And this brings us toward Marduk, the great god of Babylon. In the long life of Mesopotamian religion, gods rose and shifted as cities rose and shifted. Marduk was not always the enormous figure he later became. Babylon itself was not always the center of the world, though Babylon certainly learned to speak as if it were. As the city grew in power, its god grew with it. Titles gathered around him. Stories bent toward him. Older divine forces entered his orbit. The Mushkhushshu became one of his signs. That matters. A god with such a creature beside him is making a claim without saying a word. He commands what others fear. He is not threatened by strangeness, the strange has been brought into service. The god does not stand beside a soft lamb or a harmless bird. He stands near a beast made from the old fear of serpents, the royal strength of lions, the piercing force of talons, and the sacred mark of horns. It is not a pet. It is not a mascot, though Babylonian public relations, if we may call it that gently, would have been very pleased with how memorable it was. It is a visible extension of divine power. If you were standing here with me before the gate, with your hands dusty and your neck tilted back, you might not explain all of this in careful words. You might not say, "Ah, yes, an emblem of controlled sacred threat linked to Babylonian divine kingship." Most people do not say things like that after a long walk in the heat, unless they are trying very hard to be invited nowhere. But you would feel something. You would feel scale. You would feel repetition. You would feel that the city had planned your smallness. You would feel the creatures moving in rows across blue brick. Lions, bulls, dragons, each one a calm announcement that Babylon belonged to powers older and larger than a human visitor. That is what ancient spectacle does. It speaks to the body before it speaks to the mind. And the Mushkhushshu, more than the familiar lion or bull, slows the eye because it refuses to become ordinary. A lion can become a symbol quickly. A bull can become a symbol quickly. But this dragon stays foreign even after you have named it. The more you look, the more it looks back. It is assembled, yet graceful. Impossible, yet official. Strange, yet clearly meant to stand exactly where it stands. That is the great quiet tension of the creature. It seems to come from nightmare, but it serves order. It seems to belong to the wild edges of thought, but it is placed on royal architecture. It looks like a question carved from animals, and Babylon answers that question by putting it beside Marduk. For now, let the answer remain dim, like a shape behind smoke. The fire settles. The river breathes somewhere beyond the walls. The blue bricks cool in the night air. The dragon keeps its long neck lifted, not lunging, not sleeping, simply watching. And in that watchfulness, the old city begins to tell us that the most powerful monsters are not always the ones a hero kills. Sometimes they are the ones a civilization teaches to stand guard. If the dragon on the blue gate feels familiar now, do not trust that feeling too quickly. Familiarity is a soft little trap. The moment we think we have understood an ancient creature, it tends to slip aside and show us another face. The Mushkhushshu is like that. It allows us to call it a dragon, because we need a first word, a small bridge from our world into its world. But once we have crossed that bridge, the word begins to creak beneath our feet. This creature is not waiting in a cave. It is not sleeping on treasure. It is not the great scaly problem at the end of a heroic tale. It is standing in public, in sacred brick, repeated with calm confidence, as if Babylon expected everyone who saw it to understand that it belonged there. And they likely did. Ancient art was not made first for us. It was made for the people who lived inside its language. They knew the gods. They knew the animal signs. They knew which creatures belonged to which divine powers. A modern visitor may need a label, a guidebook, and perhaps a cup of coffee strong enough to wake a minor king. A Babylonian viewer carried more of the code already within the mind. So when the Mushkhushshu appeared with the other animals of the Ishtar Gate, it was not a random wonder. It stood among a group of sacred signs. The lion belonged to Ishtar, goddess of love, war, and overwhelming presence. The bull, or the powerful wild ox, belonged to Adad, the storm god. The Mushkhushshu belonged to Marduk. 3 kinds of power moved across the gate in ordered rows, each one carrying a divine name without needing to speak it. This is why the creature has to be approached slowly. If we ask whether it was real in the modern animal sense, we may be asking the least interesting question first. People have wondered whether such a specific beast might preserve the memory of a crocodile, a great reptile, a fossil bone, or some older encounter turned sacred by distance. Some have gone much further. Of course, Mesopotamia attracts wild theories the way lamplight attracts moths. And once someone says Anunnaki and dragon in the same breath, there is always a chance that a very serious chart will appear before dawn. Still, the calmer explanation is stronger. Human beings have always known how to take pieces of the visible world and join them into a new shape that can carry invisible meaning. A snake is real. A lion is real. A bird of prey is real. Horns belong to the visual language of divinity. Put those together in a culture that thought deeply through symbols, and the result does not need to be a zoological report. It becomes theology with claws. The Mushkhushshu was a composite being. That phrase sounds clean, maybe too clean, like something written on a museum card in a room where everyone is trying not to sneeze. But there is a living idea inside it. A composite creature is not just an animal made from spare parts. It is a gathering. It takes powers that would normally live apart and folds them into one body. Look again at the long neck. It leans forward with a quiet suspicion, not exactly threatening, not exactly calm. It gives the creature a strange alertness. A lion lowers itself before the leap. To snake coils, a bird tilts. The Mushkhushshu seems to inspect. There is almost an official mood to that posture, as if it has been appointed to watch the human world, and is not deeply impressed by what it has seen. The head is serpent-like, and often horned. The horn matters so much that we should pause there again. In Mesopotamian I Major, divine figures often wear horned crowns. Horns rise from the head as signs of sacred force. They are small mountains of meaning. When a creature bears that sign, it is not ordinary. It belongs near the divine sphere, near temples, near the heavy conversations between kings and gods. The Mushkhushshu does not have to be a god itself. It only has to carry the mark of nearness. The body is scaled, and the scales pull it toward the ancient fear of reptiles, toward the ground, toward water, toward hidden places. You know that feeling when you lift a flat stone and see something vanish beneath it before your mind has finished naming it? The world suddenly feels less empty. That is the mood of scales. They make the creature seem older than the warm-breathing animals of the field. Then come the lion forelegs. This is where the beast becomes royal. The front of a creature is the part that meets the viewer. To give that front the limbs of a lion is to say that the first force you encounter is command. The paws are not delicate. They do not ask. They stand as if standing itself were a form of rule. The lion was already a sign of kingship. Violence controlled by rank. Sunlight hardened into muscle. On the Mushkhushshu, that strength becomes part of something stranger. The hind legs are bird-like, ending in talons. A less careful artist might have made the body entirely leonine or entirely serpentine, but the old design does something more unsettling. It changes the logic at the back of the creature. Talons suggest a different kind of attack, a different kind of grip. They are precise. They belong to a creature that descends, seizes, and leaves silence behind. Without giving the Mushkhushshu wings, the artist gives it a hint of the sky. And the tail, long and sinuous, keeps the serpent present until the end. It does not let the creature settle into the shape of a lion, or a birt, or any ordinary beast. The serpent remains threaded through the whole form, like a memory that cannot be removed. This is why the body feels so deliberate. It does not look like a mistake. It does not look as if someone began drawing a lion, got distracted by a snake, and then panicked near the feet. It looks designed. It looks as though each feature has been chosen because it brings a particular fear, a particular respect, a particular old association. In a sleepier world, perhaps we could leave it there, saying simply that the Mushkhushshu is a sacred dragon. But the old cities are never quite that simple. The creature has a history before its most famous appearance. And that history matters because it keeps us from thinking Babylon invented it from nothing. Long before the blue glazed bricks made it unforgettable, Mesopotamia had already spent centuries imagining divine power through strange animals. Babylon was not the beginning of everything. Before Babylon stood at the center, there were Sumerian cities, Akkadian rulers, local gods, old cults, old myths, temple households, scribes bent over clay, offerings placed in quiet rooms, and names spoken by generations who never saw the Ishtar Gate. Religious symbols moved through that world like water through channels. A god might rise with a city. A symbol might pass from one divine figure to another. An older creature might be reinterpreted when a new center of power claimed it. Nothing sacred had to remain frozen forever. Mesopotamian religion lived by memory, but memory itself was active. It copied, adapted, absorbed, rearranged. Some scholars connect earlier forms of the serpent dragon with gods such as Ninazu and Tishbak. We should say that gently, because the trail is old and not every footprint is clear. Still, the connection is important. It suggests that the Mushkhushshu type did not begin as a late decorative invention for Babylonian walls. It had roots in older layers of Mesopotamian thought. Ninazu is especially interesting because he draws us toward deeper, darker ground. He is associated in various traditions with the underworld, with healing, and with serpentine symbolism. That combination may sound strange at first, but ancient thought often placed healing and danger near one another. The thing that harms may also reveal power. The serpent that frightens may also renew itself. The underworld may be a place of dread, but it is also a place of hidden depth, ancestors, roots, and forces beneath the visible surface. Picture an older shrine. Long before Babylon has dressed the dragon in imperial blue. The room is dim. The air is thick with oil smoke. Clay tablets rest somewhere in shadow. A priest moves carefully, because careful movement is one of the old forms of respect. Outside, the sun is harsh, but inside the sacred space, the light is low, and the imagination turns downward, toward earth, death, healing, and the secret life of serpents. In such a world, a serpent dragon does not feel like an extravagant invention. It feels almost expected. If divine power can move through the earth, if hidden waters can matter, if the dead are not simply gone, if dreams and omens speak, then a sacred creature with a scaled body and a horned head is a shape for something too old and too difficult to name directly. Then there is Tishpak, associated with Eshnuna, another stage in the old life of the serpent dragon. The important thing is movement. The dragon type appears to travel through divine associations before it becomes fixed in our minds as the beast of Marduk. It gathers age. It gathers authority. It becomes usable by powers greater than one local moment. That is how symbols survive. A symbol too narrow may perish with the city that first loved it. A symbol that can move, that can be adopted, lifted, renamed, and placed into new sacred arrangements, has a longer life. The Mushkhushshu had that kind of life. It could stand beside older gods, and later it could stand beside Babylon. This older background makes Marduk and the dragon feel less like an invention and more like an inheritance. As Babylon rose, Marduk rose. As Marduk rose, he gathered more than praise. He gathered functions, titles, stories, and symbolic companions. The dragon, with its old serpent force and sacred danger, could be drawn into his circle and made to speak for his authority. Marduk was a perfect figure for that kind of claim. In Babylonian theology, especially in the great creation story known as the Enuma Elish, he becomes the champion who defeats Tiamat, the great chaotic sea power, and establishes order. The details are immense, cosmic, and sometimes fierce, but the emotional shape is simple. Chaos rise. A god masters it. The world becomes structured. Rule becomes legitimate. The Mushkhushshu is not simply Tiamat placed on a wall. That would be too easy and too careless. But the creature belongs to the same broad imagination, the same belief that divine rule proves itself by mastering dangerous forces. Marduk does not become great because he avoids chaos. He becomes great because he defeats it, commands it, and turns its terror into order. Now the dragon beside him makes sense. It is danger that no longer wanders. It is fear given a station. It is a sacred threat that has been made loyal to the god of Babylon. The serpent is there, but it does not rebel. The lion's strength is there, but it does not roam loose. The talons are there, but they are contained within an official image. The horn is there, lifting the whole creature into divine association. When you think of it this way, the Ishtar Gate becomes more than a beautiful object. It becomes a lesson in how an empire wanted to be felt. Before a visitor heard a royal proclamation, before a priest explained anything, before an inscription could be read, the body already understood. The wall was saying, "The city is ordered. The gods are present. The king builds under divine shadow. Even the dragon is not outside the system. Even the dragon has a place." There is something dark in that, but also something strangely soothing. We give shape to fears so they do not remain shapeless. We name storms. We draw borders around danger. We put little lights along roads at night. The ancient Babylonians built a gate and placed a divine dragon on it, which is admittedly more dramatic than a bedside lamp. But the human impulse is related. Give the dark a form. Put it where it can be seen. Tell yourself it is guarding the threshold. The Mushkhushshu, then, was never only an animal and never only a myth. It was a meeting point. It stood where religion touched politics, where art touched fear, where older gods touched newer power, where the hidden serpent world touched the public face of empire. It was made of animals, but it was also made of claims. And perhaps that is why it still holds the eye. Other ancient creatures can be admired and then placed gently back into the cabinet of memory. This one resists. It remains slightly cold. It remains watchful. It remains too official to dismiss and too strange to domesticate. The fire beside us has burned a little lower now. The room is quiet. Somewhere far away in the mind, Babylon is still blue under the evening light. The lions continue their silent procession. The bulls keep their heavy storm calm. And between them, the Mushkhushshu waits in its long, scaled body, carrying older gods behind it and Marduk ahead of it, as if all of Mesopotamian deep time has narrowed for a moment into one horned head, one lifted neck, one patient creature at the gate. The old blue gate is the place where most modern eyes meet the dragon, but the creature did not begin there. That is the first thing to understand. Babylon made it famous. Babylon gave it color and scale, and a place where travelers could feel its gaze above them. Yet the thought behind it was older than that wall. Before the rows of glazed animals marched across the gate, before Marduk stood at the center of Babylonian pride, before imperial builders fired clay until it shone like captured evening sky, the lands between the rivers were already filled with gods, shrines, city names, old prayers, and beings that did not fit comfortably into one kind of body. If you were to walk backward through that world, not with hurried steps, but slowly, as if the dust itself might be listening, Babylon would begin to lose its sharp royal outline. The blue would fade. The gate would dissolve into fragments. The streets would grow older. The names on clay tablets would change. One city would give way to another. One god would rise while another drifted into the background, and the same symbols would keep appearing in altered forms, like faces seen through smoke. Mesopotamia was never a single still picture. It was a long, breathing landscape. Sumerian cities had their own sacred moods. Akkadian rulers carried power across older boundaries. Local gods lived in local temples, guarded local people, received food, oil, incense, and fear. Kings came and went. Floods rose. Walls were repaired. Scribes copied names that had already been old when their teachers first learned them. And through all of this, images traveled. That is one of the most human things about the ancient world. People borrow what frightens them. They borrow what blesses them. They borrow a god by another name, a story with a changed ending, a creature whose shape is too useful to leave behind. A symbol that once belonged to one city might be taken into a new city and taught to speak with a different accent. It is not theft in the simple sense. It is memory surviving by changing clothes. The Mushkhushshu belongs to that kind of survival. The dragon of Babylon, the creature we see most clearly beside Marduk, seems to have older echoes behind it. Some scholars connect earlier serpent-dragon forms with gods such as Ninazu and Tishpak. We should say that carefully. The evidence is old, and old evidence sometimes arrives like a broken bowl, enough to show the curve, not enough to hold water. Still, the curve matters. Ninazu draws the story downward, into an older and darker layer of the sacred world. He is often linked with the underworld, with healing, and with serpentine imagery. It is a strange mixture at first, until you sit with it by the fire for a while. Healing and the underworld are not as far apart as they sound. Both belong to hidden processes. Both happen beneath the surface. A wound closes where the eye cannot fully follow. A seed opens in darkness. The dead lie below, and the roots of living plants reach down toward them. The snake moves through cracks and burrows, vanishing under stone, returning with the calm of something that has seen rooms we have not. That is why serpents feel ancient in so many cultures. They are close to the ground, but not in a humble way. They know the floor of the world. They pass over dust without feet. They disappear into places too narrow for human hands. They shed their skins, and because of that, people have often seen them as creatures of renewal, danger, wisdom, poison, medicina, and return. A serpent dragon attached to a god like Ninazu is not a decorative surprise. It fits a world where the earth was not merely earth. The ground held graves. It held hidden waters. It held the foundations of temples. It held whatever people could not control, but still had to honor. In such a world, a scaled creature with sacred force would feel less like a fantasy and more like a proper shape for powers that lived below speech. Picture an older shrine. Long before the Ishtar Gate became the image that survives in the minds of museums and visitors. The shrine is low and dim. The walls smell faintly of clay, oil, and old smoke. A lamp trembles in a dish. Someone has left an offering. Perhaps bread, perhaps beer, perhaps a small object touched by many fingers before it was set down. The air is not empty. It feels watched, though not by eyes alone. Outside, the plain is bright and hard, but inside, sound softens. The priest moves slowly, because speed would feel rude in such a room. There, in that older hush, a serpent beast does not need to roar. It can be present as an emblem, a carved sign, a remembered form, a sacred association. Its power lies in being understood by those who serve the god. A creature does not have to walk like an ordinary animal to be real inside a religious imagination. It has to belong. It has to carry meaning. It has to stand in the correct relation to the powers around it. Then the trail turns toward Tishpak, a god associated with Eshnunna, and the dragon type appears again in another sacred setting. The details shift, as details do when centuries handle them. A god may inherit another god's role. A city may rise and draw older symbols toward itself. A creature may be renamed, reimagined, or placed beside a new divine master. This is how old religions often live, not by remaining untouched, but by being touched again and again. It can be tempting to imagine ancient belief as a locked room with each god seated in a fixed chair forever. That would be convenient for us. But ancient people were rarely considerate enough to arrange their inner worlds for modern convenience. Their gods moved through stories. Their titles overlapped. Their symbols blended. A deity of one city might be identified with another. A local tradition might be woven into a wider royal system. Sacred power was not a set of clean museum shelves. It was more like a river delta, many channels, many crossings, some visible, some half buried in silt. The Mushkhushshu, or the older serpent-dragon type behind it, moves through that delta. It carries the old smell of earth and divine danger. It gathers associations with healing, hidden places, kingship, and command. By the time Babylon lifts it into its most famous form, the creature has already learned how to survive inside changing worlds. This matters because Babylon was very good at making things look as if they had always belonged to Babylon. Great cities are often like that. They do not merely build. They gather. They take old prestige and place it in new patterns. They invite the past to stand beside them, and then, with a completely calm face, behave as though the past had been walking toward them all along. Babylon did what successful powers often do. It inherited old things, polished them, arranged them beautifully, and let everyone feel that history itself had signed the paperwork. The dragon beside Marduk has that kind of authority. It feels ancient because it comes with depth behind it. The older Mesopotamian world was fertile ground for such a creature because it did not imagine divine power as safe in the soft sense. A god could heal, but a god could also overwhelm. A storm could water the fields or flatten them. A river could feed a city or erase its edges in one season of too much water. The same force might be blessing or disaster, depending on timing, ritual, favor, and fear. So protection did not need to look gentle. A guardian could be severe. A sacred animal could look like the sort of thing one would not invite into a sleeping room, unless perhaps one had very unusual taste in company. The point was not comfort. The point was power made loyal to order. That is the thread that runs from the older serpent beasts to the dragon of Babylon. Not simple monstrosity, not random, imagination, but danger placed into sacred relationship. The serpent was old. The lion was royal. The talons were sharp. The horn was divine. Older gods could carry parts of that meaning, and later Marduk could gather them into a larger statement. This is also why the phrase Anunnaki world has to be handled gently. In older Mesopotamian context, the Anunnaki were part of a broad and shifting divine order. In modern popular culture, the word has been stretched in many directions, sometimes so far that it is in danger of needing a rest and a cup of water. But if we keep our feet on ancient ground, the phrase still helps. It reminds us that the Mushkhushshu belongs to a crowded universe of gods, divine assemblies, city patrons, underworld powers, storm forces, omens, rituals, protective beings, demons, sacred animals, and royal claims. In that world, a dragon is not out of place. It is almost expected. If the heavens can speak through stars, if dreams can trouble kings, if statues can receive offerings, if a temple can be the house of a god, then a horned serpent beast attached to divine authority does not feel excessive. It feels like one more necessary shape in a universe where meaning presses through everything. The older roots of the Mushkhushshu also show us something about memory. Human memory does not always preserve a thing by keeping it unchanged. Sometimes it preserves a thing by letting it pass from hand to hand. A mythic creature can lose a detail and gain another. A sacred animal can move from one god to the next. A local sign can become imperial. The body changes, but the old pressure remains. That pressure is the feeling of deep time. It is the sense that the dragon on the gate is not merely a design chosen by a royal workshop. It is carrying older rooms inside it, older lamps, older offerings, older names whispered over clay and smoke. When it appears in Babylon, it does not arrive empty. It arrives full. The listener, standing before the blue gate, might not know all of this. A traveler might see only the surface, the color, the animal rows, the immense assurance of the walls. But beneath the surface, the creature has roots. Its scales remember serpents that vanished under stones. Its horn remembers divine signs older than Babylonian splendor. Its body remembers the long habit of ancient people turning fear into form. And so the story becomes slower and larger. The Mushkhushshu is not only the dragon of Marduk. It is also the heir of older sacred beasts, older gods, older ways of making visible what could not be safely touched. Babylon did not create the need for such a being. Babylon gave that need a brighter wall. The fire beside us has settled into a quiet red glow. Outside the imagined city, the rivers move in the dark, patient as memory. The old gods shift behind their names. Somewhere, in a temple older than the gate, a serpent form waits in shadow. Somewhere later, in Babylonian blue, that same kind of fear will lift its horned head and become official. The path between those moments is not straight, but it is real enough to follow by candlelight. The older roots tell us where the dragon came from, in the soft outline that survives. But roots are only half the story. To understand why the Mushkhushshu could stand so confidently beside gods and kings, we have to return to the body itself. That body is not an accident. It is one of the quiet masterpieces of ancient symbolic design. The more slowly you look at it, the less it seems like confusion, and the more it feels like a sentence written in animal parts. Begin with stillness. Imagine the dragon not moving, because most of us meet it that way, fixed in brick, held by glaze, repeated on a surface meant to last longer than the hands that made it. The body is long. The neck rises and bends forward. The head is alert. The legs hold it in place. The tail carries the line backward, like a thought that has not finished speaking. There is no wasted feature. That is what makes it so unsettling. Some monsters are excessive, crowded with too many teeth and too much noise. The Mushkhushshu is different. It is selective. It does not need more. It needs the right parts. The scales do the first work. Before we think about claws or horns, the scaled surface tells the body to keep its distance. Fur can be dangerous, but fur belongs to a world humans understand. Fur is warm. Fur reminds us of dogs, sheep, cattle, sleeping animals, hunted animals, living breath. Scales belong to another feeling. They seem cooler. They suggest armor. They suggest something older than comfort. A scaled creature does not invite touch. It resists the hand before the hand even lifts. It belongs to mud, water, reeds, cracked earth, and the underside of stones. On the Mushkhushshu, the scales make the entire body feel protected from ordinary human closeness. This is not an animal you would soothe with a palm on the neck. It would not appreciate the gesture, and honestly, neither would your palm. The serpent quality deepens that coldness. Serpents move in a way that has always troubled the human mind. They have no feet, yet they travel. They have no visible limbs, yet they strike. They can lie motionless until the world forgets them, and then become movement itself. They live near thresholds, in holes, under stones, beside water, in grass where the eye has to work harder. In an ancient landscape, the serpent was a natural teacher of unease. It did not need a myth to become meaningful. Its own life was already symbolic. It vanished and returned. It shed skin. It carried poison in some forms, healing associations in others. It seemed close to the earth's secrets. It belonged to places where human certainty thins. So when the Mushkhushshu takes a long serpent body, it borrows all of that. It becomes old, hidden, and difficult to command, except, of course, that on the gate it is commanded. That is the crucial turn. The serpent danger is present, but it has been given posture. It has been placed in a row. It has been made part of public order. Now look at the forelegs. They are not delicate. They are not the thin limbs of a lizard or the soft feet of a harmless creature. They are lion-like, heavy with the idea of strength. A lion is one of the oldest visual languages of power. It brings sun, teeth, hunt, king, and pride into one image. A lion does not need to explain why other animals make space. By giving the Mushkhushshu lion 4 legs, the artist gives it command of the ground. The serpent lion alone might feel too hidden, too close to earth and underworld. The lion limbs bring the creature up into royal space. They let it stand before us, not merely slide past us. They make it visible as authority. The front of the body is important because the front is where a creature meets the world. A viewer reads intention there. The head watches. The chest advances. The forelegs carry the first force. If those 4 legs are leonine, then the first message is strength that can hold territory. This dragon does not drift. It occupies. Then the body changes at the back. The hind legs are bird-like, with talons. That shift is strange, but it is not clumsy. It brings a different kind of danger into the design. The lion rules by weight and muscle. The bird of prey rules by precision. Talons are not simply claws. They are instruments of grip. They seize. They hold. They make escape seem briefly theoretical, which is a polite way of saying, not likely. With those talons, the Mushkhushshu borrows something from the sky without becoming a winged creature. It does not need wings. The hint is enough. Ancient design often works by suggestion. The bird legs add sharpness, speed, and another realm of predation. The creature now belongs not only to ground and hidden depth, but also to the high world of sudden descent. This mixture gives it range. Land, under earth, sky, templa, gate. The Mushkhushshu gathers realms without Fukti becoming any one of them. That is the power of the composite form. It is not confused. It is wide. The horned head lifts the whole design into the sacred. If scales and claws make the creature dangerous, the horn tells us why that danger is allowed to stand near divine authority. In Mesopotamian imagery, horned crowns and horned forms are tied to gods and sacred status. Horns are not little ornaments placed there because the head looked lonely. They are signs. A horn can change an animal completely. A serpent with a horn is not simply a serpent. A lion with a horn is no longer only a lion. The horn tells the viewer that this being participates in a divine field. It belongs near powers that receive offerings, decide fates, send storms, protect cities, and trouble kings in their dreams. The head itself, long and watchful, gives the creature its mood. It is not a roaring head. It is not frozen in exaggerated violence. It seems to inspect. That is almost more unsettling. Rage is simple. Watchfulness is deeper. A raging beast can be imagined as temporary. It will exhaust itself. A watchful beast seems patient. It can wait through rains and through the fall of human names. That patience suits a gate. A gate is a place of passage, but also of judgment. People, goods, armies, and processions move through it. A creature placed there must not look distracted. The Mushkhushshu looks as though it understands its station. The tale finishes the thought. It keeps the serpent line alive behind the body. A heavy tail might make the creature feel like a natural beast of muscle and mass. A vanished tail would make the design feel unfinished. This tail is long, narrow, continuous. It draws the eye back into the scaled body and reminds us that the serpent has not been left behind. It has been stretched through the whole form. All of this could have become awkward. Composite creatures often risk becoming piles of parts. A little lion here, a little bird there, a bit of snake to keep things exciting. And suddenly, the sacred beast looks as though a tired artist had a very crowded afternoon. The Mushkhushshu avoids that. Its body flows. The long neck and tail hold the design together. The legs interrupt the line just enough. The horn gives identity. The whole creature reads as one being. That unity is part of why it lasted. It is memorable from a distance. It works in profile. It repeats well on brick. A royal wall needs images that can be recognized by many kinds of viewers. The Mushkhushshu has that power. Even simplified, it remains itself. Long neck, horned head, scaled body, mixed legs, serpent, tail. Once seen, it is difficult to misplace. A sacred symbol should not become furniture too easily. It should remain charged. The Mushkhushshu stays charged because it never allows the viewer to rest fully in one category. It is official, but not tame. Designed, but not harmless. Animal, but more than animal. Frightening, but not evil in any simple way. This is where the creature becomes most important. It shows that the ancient imagination did not need divine order to look soft. We often make order gentle in our minds. Clean lines, calm voices, smooth stone, white robes, whatever makes us feel that the universe has been neatly folded and placed in a drawer. Mesopotamian order could look far more severe. It could wear scales. It could have talons. It could stand on a gate and remind everyone that safety is sometimes made from controlled danger. A city like Babylon needed that language. It lived in a world of flood, drought, war, disease, hunger, ambition, and divine uncertainty. A gentle symbol alone would not have been enough. The city had to show that it was protected by powers strong enough to face the dark. The Mushkhushshu was a perfect answer. It did not deny fear. It organized fear. The creature says, "The dangerous is here, but it is not loose. The strange is here, but it serves the god. The old serpent force is here, but it has been brought into the city's sacred order. The talons are sharp, but they are part of the wall. The lion's strength is real, but it stands in a divine row. The horn marks the whole being as more than ordinary threat. This is why the body is so effective beside Marduk. A god who rises to command cosmic order needs symbols that show mastery without softness. In the great Babylonian imagination, Marduk defeats chaos and arranges the world. The dragon body makes that idea visible in quieter form. It is chaos, not destroyed completely, but disciplined. It is danger made a tendon. There is something almost comforting in that, if we listen gently. Human life has always needed ways to live beside fear. We do not erase the river because it floods. We build banks, channels, rituals, calendars, prayers. We do not erase night. We light lamps. We do not erase death. We bury, remember, speak names, build tombs, and tell stories by fire. The Mushkhushshu is part of that old work. It gives fear a body, then places that body where it can guard. The stronger explanation is also beautiful in its own way. Ancient artists knew animals. They knew fear. They knew divine signs. They knew how a body could teach. The Mushkhushshu is not weak imagination. It is skilled, symbolic work. It takes the old danger of scales, the royal command of lion limbs, the sharp reach of talons, the sacred signal of horns, and the long patience of a serpent neck, then gathers all of it into a creature that can stand beside a god. By now, the fire in our room is low enough that the shadows have grown patient. The dragon on the imagined gate has become clearer, not safer exactly, but clearer. Its body is no longer a puzzle of random parts. It is a map of ancient feeling. It tells us that power may be old and cold. It may be strong enough to stand. It may be sharp enough to seize. It may be holy enough to terrify gently. And the more we understand the body, the more naturally the story turns toward the god beside it, the city around it, and the blue gate where these meanings were made public in brick, color, ceremony, and silence. By now, the dragon is no longer a simple shape on a wall. It has roots behind it, older gods behind it, and a body made from several kinds of sacred fear. The next question comes quietly, because the old world rarely answers all at once. How did this creature come to belong so strongly to Marduk? To ask that is to step into the way cities make gods larger. Marduk did not begin as the center of everything. No god begins that way in the human imagination, even if later hymns may speak as if the heavens had always been arranged for him. He was the god of Babylon, and Babylon itself was once only one city among other proud and ancient cities. Around it stood old names, old temples, old claims, old rivalries, and all the patient weight of places that had been sacred before Babylon learned to speak with imperial confidence. But history has a way of changing the size of a god. When a city rises, its god rises with it. When kings rule from that city, when scribes copy its stories, when priests repeat its names in ceremony, when walls grow higher and processions move through streets, the god of that city begins to fill more space in the divine world. This is not merely belief floating in the air. It is belief built into stone, clay, law, festival, food storage, military success, and the daily habits of people who wake under that god's shadow. So Babylon rose, and Marduk rose. It is a slow thing to imagine, not a sudden thunderclap, though thunder would not be out of place in Mesopotamia. It is more like a lamp being moved from a side room into the central hall. At first, it lights a small circle. Then another hand raises it higher. Then another room notices. Then the whole house begins to rearrange itself around the glow. Marduk gathered status. He gathered titles. He gathered stories. Older powers that had once belonged elsewhere were drawn toward him. This may sound ambitious, and it was, but ancient religion often worked this way. A great god did not become great by standing alone like a lonely statue in a clean, empty room. A great god became great by gathering. He absorbed meanings, functions, divine honors, and symbols that had already carried authority. The Mushkhushshu was perfect for that process. It already felt old. It already belonged to the language of sacred danger. It already carried the serpent, the lion, the talon, and the horn. It had enough strangeness to suggest forces beyond ordinary life, and enough order in its design to serve a god who claimed mastery over the world. Marduk did not need a mild creature beside him. He needed something that could make visible the power to command what others feared. The pairing becomes even clearer when we listen to the great Babylonian creation story, the Enuma Elish. We can say the name softly because it has crossed a great deal of time to reach us. In that story, Marduk becomes the champion of the gods. He confronts Tiamat, the vast, chaotic sea power, the old watery threat that stands against divine order. The tale is large, cosmic in scale, yet at its heart is a simple pattern. Chaos rise. A god faces it. Order is made from victory. We should be careful here. The Mushkhushshu is not simply Tiamat. It is not a little drawing of the defeated sea power placed politely on a city wall. Ancient symbols are rarely that flat. But the dragon belongs to the same world of thought. It belongs to a religious imagination in which true authority proves itself by mastering dangerous forces. Marduk does not avoid chaos. He defeats it. He does not tremble before the strange. He commands it. He does not need the world to be soft before he can rule it. He rules because he can stand where the world is frightening and make structure from it. Now the Mushkhushshu beside him begins to feel inevitable. The creature says, this god has dangerous things on his side. The serpent force serves him. The lion's strength serves him. The sharp talons serve him. The horned, sacred beast stands under his name. It is a quiet message, but not a small one. It says that fear has changed allegiance. That is one of the deepest ideas in this story. Fear does not disappear in Babylon. The city does not pretend rivers cannot flood. Armies cannot arrive. Sickness cannot enter houses. Kings cannot fall, or gods cannot be angered. The old world was far too honest for that. Instead, Babylon gives fear a place within order. It draws the frightening creature on the wall and says, this too is under divine rule. There is comfort there, although it is not the soft comfort of a lullaby. It is the comfort of a locked gate, of a torch in a dark courtyard, of a guard who looks more frightening than whatever might be outside. It is not saying that the night is harmless. It is saying that the night is being watched. Marduk needed that kind of symbol because his authority was not merely personal. It was civic, cosmic, and political all at once. The god of Babylon was tied to the city's claim about itself. Babylon did not wish to seem like a fortunate cluster of buildings by a river. It wished to seem central, chosen, ordered, watched over. It wanted its walls and rituals to tell every visitor that its power had roots in heaven. A king who built in the name of Marduk was doing more than showing devotion. He was placing his rule inside a divine arrangement. He was saying that the city, the temple, the court, the festival, the armies, the brickmakers, the scribes, the priests, the whole enormous machine of human order, all of it belonged beneath the god. That is why a sacred beast matters. It is not a pet. It is not a mascot. It is not there because the god needed an impressive animal in the background, like a nervous ruler posing beside a very expensive statue. The beast expresses the god's nature. It lets people see something that cannot be seen directly. You may not see Marduk walking through the gate, but you see his dragon. You may not enter the innermost rooms of the temple, but you pass beneath the images that tell you whose power fills the city. You may not understand every hymn or inscription, but your body understands scales, claws, horns, and height. That is how sacred imagery works when it works well. It speaks before language. It enters through the eye and settles somewhere near the ribs. Imagine a festival day in Babylon. Not too loudly, because we are keeping the night soft. The city wakes early. Water is poured. Floors are swept. Priestly garments are prepared. Somewhere, bread is set out. Somewhere else, animals shift in their pens. People speak in low voices, because a ceremony changes the air even before it begins. The route through the city waits, sun-touched, dust rising in small, pale breaths from the street. The images on the walls are already there, waiting through heat, smoke, rain, and moonlight. Lions, bulls, dragons. The repeated forms give the city a rhythm, a sacred beat in clay and glaze. Marduk is not an abstract idea in such a setting. He is present through ritual, through image, through temple, through the fear and hope of those who gather. The Mushkhushshu helps carry that presence outward. It lets the god reach the public face of the city. Babylon did something very clever with older symbols. It did not erase the past. It absorbed it. If an old dragon type already carried sacred weight, placing it beside Marduk honored that age and declared that the force now belonged to the god of Babylon. Of course, we should be gentle with the certainty of such claims. The ancient evidence does not always let us see every step. We cannot watch the first moment when one priest or artist or tradition made the connection. We cannot sit in the room where a symbol changed hands. What we can see is the pattern. Marduk rose. Babylon rose. The Mushkhushshu became one of the strongest visual signs attached to him. By the time most of the world remembers the creature, it is already his. That kind of memory is common. Empires are very good at making their version of a symbol survive. They build it larger. They repeat it. They place it where people must pass. The older versions do not vanish entirely, but they become quieter. They stand behind the famous image like ancestors behind a king. And the famous image is powerful because it makes Marduk feel more than local. A god with a dragon of controlled danger appears, capable of ruling beyond familiar boundaries. A lion might say royal strength. A bull might say storm and force. But the Mushkhushshu says something stranger, broader, more difficult to reduce. It says that the god commands powers that cross categories. It says his authority reaches into the serpent dark, the lion field, the bird sky, and the divine realm marked by horns. That is why the creature fits him so well. Marduk in Babylonian thought becomes a god of order after conflict. His greatness is not quiet softness. It is order won. It is structure after danger. It is the world arranged by one strong enough to face what was formless and threatening. The Mushkhushshu is that idea in animal form. It is not chaos itself. It is chaos trained to stand beside order. It is not the enemy. It is what the victorious god can afford to keep close. If you were a subject of Babylon, this could reassure you. The city is protected by more than walls. The god has power over what is fearful. If you were an enemy, the same image could warn you. The city is not alone. Even its monsters are organized. That double feeling, reassurance for those inside, warning for those outside, gives the dragon much of its force. It is a comfort with teeth. It is a blessing with talons. It is a sacred symbol that does not smile, and perhaps that is why it is believable. Honestly, there is something almost modern in that. We still want our protectors to look capable. A watchman who seems too gentle may not calm us. A locked door matters because it can resist. A storm wall matters because the sea is not polite. Babylon understood this long before us. It did not decorate its threshold with softness alone. It placed controlled danger where everyone could see it. Marduk and the Mushkhushshu together make a statement about the old Babylonian dream of order. The dream is not that darkness never exists. The dream is that darkness can be mastered, named, arranged, and placed under divine command. Now the fire in our room has burned down into a slow amber bed. The smoke lifts thinly. The old city waits in the mind. Somewhere inside Babylon, the god has his temple. Somewhere on the gate, his dragon stands in blue light. Older serpent memories move behind it. Royal claims gather around it. And between the hidden shrine and the public wall, one idea becomes clear in the quietest way. The dragon belongs to Marduk because Marduk is the god who can make danger serve the world. Once the dragon belongs to Marduk, the story moves naturally toward the wall where that belonging became impossible to ignore. A sacred beast can live in a hymn, in a seal, in a small carved image, in the guarded memory of priests. But Babylon did something larger. Babylon placed the creature on the skin of the city. That is why we return to the Ishtar Gate. A gate is never only a gate. Even a simple doorway changes the body. You pause before entering. You adjust your pace. You cross from one condition into another. Outside becomes inside. Public becomes protected. Stranger becomes visitor, subject, guest, or threat. A great city gate makes that little human hesitation enormous. It turns crossing into a ceremony. Babylon understood this deeply. The city did not present itself as a place one simply wandered into while thinking about dinner. It arranged approach. It created expectation. Walls rose. Streets directed movement. Temples anchored space. Processions gave the year a sacred rhythm. The Ishtar Gate stood in that system as a threshold of power, a place where architecture and religion met so closely that separating them would feel almost rude. Imagine coming toward it in the bright heat of day. The road has pressed dust into your feet. The river air lingers behind you, damp and mineral, mixed with the smell of reeds, clay, sweat, animals, and smoke. Ahead, the blue begins to appear, not all at once, but as a cool interruption in the brown world of baked earth. The color feels impossible for a moment. It is too deep, too deliberate, too much like a piece of night standing upright under the sun. The bricks are glazed. This matters, because glaze gives clay a second life. Ordinary mud becomes surface. Surface becomes brightness. Brightness becomes memory. The earth is dug, mixed, shaped, dried, fired, colored, fired again, and placed into order. In that process, the city performs its own idea of civilization. It takes river, mud, and heat and labor, then turns them into a face for empire. There is something almost tender in the labor, if you slow down enough to notice it. Hands pressed clay. Eyes judged color. Workers carried weight. Kilns breathed heat. Bricks cooled. Someone set them into place with a care that probably did not feel poetic at the time. Work rarely feels poetic while the back is hurting. Yet the result became one of the most powerful images of the ancient world. On the gate and the processional way, animals moved in repeated rows. Lions for Ishtar, bulls for Adad, dragons for Marduk. The order was not accidental. The city was not decorating itself with whatever creatures looked impressive after lunch. Each animal belonged to a divine field. Together they made the wall speak in several sacred voices at once. The lion carried Ishtar, goddess of love and war, tenderness and terror, attraction and destruction, a goddess whose power could never be reduced to one mood. Her lions move with royal confidence, their mouths open, their bodies stride. They bring the force of the goddess into public space. The bull, or wild ox, carried Adad, the storm god. It brought thunder into animal form. It suggested cloud weight, rain, weather, force gathered in the sky and sent down to earth. In a riverland where crops depended on water and water could become either mercy or disaster, the storm was never merely weather. It was divine mood made audible. And the Mushkhushshu carried Marduk. Among lion and bull, the dragon does its colder work. It does not feel as familiar as the others. It is the animal that makes the eye return. A visitor may understand lion and bull quickly, but the dragon asks to be read more slowly. It is the strange signature of the city's great god, the sign that Babylon was protected not only by known powers, but by forces that crossed the boundary of ordinary nature. The Ishtar Gate was built under Nebuchadnezzar II. whose name has a weight in the memory of Babylon. For a listening voice, we can say it more gently as Nebuchadnezzar II. He was a king who understood building as speech. A wall can talk. A gate can praise. A brick can become a sentence if a ruler places it carefully enough. Royal building in Mesopotamia was never only practical. Of course, walls protected. Of course, gates controlled movement. Of course, towers and streets served earthly needs. But the deeper message was that the king maintained order on behalf of the gods. He did not merely stack bricks. He aligned the city with divine structure. He made the sacred visible enough that even a tired traveler could feel it. That feeling is important. Ancient public art often worked on people who could not read long inscriptions, or who would never be allowed into the inner places where priests performed the most delicate rituals. But everyone could see a gate. Everyone could feel scale. Everyone could understand repetition. Everyone could look up and know that the city wished to be seen as more than human arrangement. The gate, therefore, became a kind of public theology. Not theology in the dry sense. Not a lecture. Not a tablet full of careful argument. It was theology in blue brick. Theology through height, color, animal bodies, and the slow narrowing of the road as one approached power. If you were a merchant entering Babylon, the gate told you that you had come into a city of gods. If you were an envoy, it told you that the king who received you was backed by powers older than your message. If you were a local citizen, it reassured you that the city had a sacred skin. If you were an enemy, or someone with doubtful intentions, the message was even simpler. Be careful. The walls are watching. There is a quiet humor in the thought that the gate did all this without ever having to clear its throat. Humans love speeches, but bricks can be more patient. They do not forget their lines. They repeat the same message every morning. They keep speaking after the king has gone to dust. The processional way deepened the effect. Sacred movement through the city, especially in festival contexts, gave the images a living rhythm. The animals did not move, but the people did. That is the secret. When bodies pass beside repeated figures, the wall becomes almost animated. Each lion appears after another lion. Each bull after another bull. Each dragon after another dragon. The viewer moves, and the creatures seem to accompany the motion. Picture the New Year rites of Babylon in a softened way. Not as a loud spectacle, but as something felt in layers. Early light touches the upper bricks. Dust rises under sandals. Cloth brushes against skin. Priests move with controlled steps. The air carries murmurs, incense, animal breath, and the faint dampness of the river. Somewhere in the great movement of ritual, Marduk is honored. The city renews itself, and the order of the world is remembered again. The Mushkhushshu watches from the wall during such movement. It does not need to act. Its stillness is part of its force. A sacred image does not always gain power by doing something. Sometimes it gains power by remaining unchanged while human generations pass in front of it. The gate also shows how ancient power loved repetition. One dragon might be strange. Many dragons become law. Repetition teaches the eye that the image is official, expected, stable. It turns wonder into atmosphere. By the time a person has passed along enough rows of sacred animals, the city has entered the body as a rhythm. This is why the Mushkhushshu on the Ishtar Gate is so different from a creature hidden in a story. A story is heard, then remembered. A gate is encountered. It has weather, dust, height, shadow, and the pressure of actual passage. You do not only imagine the dragon. You walk beneath the world that has placed it there. And there is another layer. The gate was not only art. It was proof of organization. To make such a monument required resources, planning, labor, technical knowledge, artistic discipline, and royal command. The blue glaze itself tells a story of controlled material. Clay becomes brick. Brick becomes image. Image becomes theology. Theology becomes empire. The process mirrors the message of the dragon. Raw matter shaped into order. Danger shaped into protection. Dust shaped into lasting color. The entire monument says, we can organize the world. That claim is never innocent. It can comfort, and it can intimidate. Babylon was not merely a dream city. It was also a state, with hierarchy, labor, conquest, pride, and the hard machinery that supports grandeur. A gate this beautiful may still cast a long shadow. But that is part of dark history, told softly. Beauty and power often sit beside each other, neither one canceling the other. If you stand in imagination before the gate at evening, after the heat has gone from the brick, the blue changes. It no longer feels like daylight trapped in glaze. It becomes deeper, cooler, almost watery. The dragons seem quieter then. Their scales do not flash. Their bodies lie in the dimness with a patience that feels older than the city itself. A child might look up and feel wonder. A priest might look and think of Marduk. A foreign visitor might feel the intended pressure of Babylonian greatness. A worker who helped carry bricks might feel something else entirely. Perhaps pride, perhaps exhaustion, perhaps the private knowledge that empire is built one aching shoulder at a time. The gate holds all of them. That is why it remains such a powerful object in memory. It is not only beautiful, it is crowded with human meanings. Faith, politics, labor, fear, artistry, ambition, ritual, and the quiet need to believe that a city can stand against chaos. The Mushkhushshu is one part of that crowd, but an unforgettable part, because it carries the strange promise at the center of the whole structure. The promise is that the dangerous forces have been named. The promise is that the gods are present. The promise is that Babylon is not merely exposed under the sky, but wrapped in sacred order. Of course, no city is protected forever. The listener knows this, even if the ancient gate does not yet know it. All walls age. All kings become names. All processional roads fall silent. But in the bright centuries of Babylonian confidence, the Ishtar Gate made the claim beautifully. Here is the city. Here are the gods. Here is Marduk. Here is his dragon, standing where fear becomes protection. The room around us is quieter now. The fire has settled. Candlelight trembles softly along the edges of thought. In the mind, the gate remains standing, blue against dust, blue against evening, blue against the slow breath of the river. Lions pass in rows. Bulls carry the storm in still bodies. And the Mushkhushshu, long neck lifted, keeps watch from the sacred skin of Babylon. The gate has shown us how Babylon wanted to be seen. Blue brick, sacred animals, royal order, and a dragon standing where the city met the world. But the deeper question is softer and darker. What does it mean when a civilization places fear at the entrance and calls it protection? The Mushkhushshu gives us one of the oldest answers. It tells us that fear does not always have to be banished. Sometimes fear is shaped. Sometimes it is named. Sometimes it is placed under a god, set into a wall, and taught to face outward. This may sound strange at first, because many modern stories train us to think of frightening creatures as problems to be removed. If a beast has scales and claws, someone must fight it. If it has a horned head, someone must prove courage by approaching it with a weapon and questionable planning. That is a familiar story, and a useful one in its own way. But the Mesopotamian imagination was not trapped inside that pattern. A frightening form could belong to order. A severe image could protect. A creature that looked like danger could become the sign that danger had been mastered. This is why the Mushkhushshu does not feel like an enemy on the Ishtar Gate. It feels like a warning. Yes, but a warning with official permission. It is not breaking into the city. It has been built into the city. It is not clawing at the walls from outside. It is part of the wall itself. There is a quiet human truth there. People have always needed ways to live beside what they fear. A king brings stability, then asks for labor and obedience. A wall protects, but also reminds everyone that something outside may need to be kept out. The ancient world did not pretend that safety was simple. It knew that protection often stood very close to threat. So, the dragon becomes a threshold creature. A threshold is a nervous place. It is neither fully outside nor fully inside. It is where feet pause. It is where eyes lift. It is where strangers are measured. Offerings are carried. Armies are imagined. And ordinary people feel the change between one kind of space and another. The Mushkhushshu belongs there because it is also between categories. Serpent and lion, bird and divine sign, monster and emblem, danger and guardian. The creature is a body made for crossings. Imagine standing again beneath the gate. This time not as a traveler arriving for the first time, but as someone who has lived near Babylon long enough to know its rhythms. You have heard market voices wake with the dawn. You have smelled bread, rivamut, animals, sweat, sesame oil, smoke from little fires. You have watched priests move in garments that seem too clean for the dust of the street. You have seen officials pass with the stiff, careful faces of people carrying importance like a full cup. The gate is part of daily life, but it never becomes ordinary. You may pass it often. You may grow used to its position. You may even complain about the crowd near it. Because human beings can complain in the shadow of almost anything. Yet somewhere inside, the image continues to work. The blue remains blue. The animals remain larger than the body. The dragon remains watchful. It teaches without speaking. It says that Marduk is near. It says that Babylon is ordered. It says that the strange has been made loyal. It says that what frightens you is not always outside the sacred world. Sometimes it is part of the sacred world, and that may be the more unsettling thought. The temples of Mesopotamia deepen this feeling. A temple was not simply a quiet room where people became religious in a soft modern sense. It was a house of a god, a center of offerings, storage, ritual, administration, memory, and rank. It belonged to the city as much as the palace did, and sometimes more deeply. Not everyone could go everywhere. Sacred space had layers, courtyards, rooms, inner places, doors, thresholds, rules. The closer one came to the divine center, the more carefully movement had to be shaped. One did not wander in as if looking for a misplaced sandal. That carefulness creates sacred fear. Sacred fear is not panic. It is not screaming in darkness. It is the feeling that one must be attentive because the place is charged. It is the silence before a name is spoken. It is the small tightening in the chest when a ritual begins and the ordinary world seems to step back. It is respect with a shadow inside it. The Mushkhushshu carries that feeling outward from temple logic into public vision. It brings sacred fear to the gate, where everyone can see it. The creature says that divine power is not soft merely because it protects. It may protect by being stronger than what threatens. It may protect by looking severe enough that danger itself seems to hesitate. There is kindness in severity sometimes. Not always, of course. Power can become cruel, and ancient empires were not gentle machines. But in the symbolic world of the gate, severity becomes reassurance. The dragon is hard because the world is hard. The dragon is watchful because life requires watchfulness. That is why the creature works so well for kingship. A king in Mesopotamia did not present himself as a private individual with a crown and a taste for inscriptions. He was supposed to maintain order. He built, judged, fought, repaired, offered, and stood beneath the gods. His legitimacy came from being aligned with the divine structure of the world. When a king used the symbols of Marduk, he was not merely decorating. He was saying that his rule belonged within a sacred arrangement. He was placing his own authority under the authority of the god, while also borrowing the god's radiance for the throne. It is a delicate exchange, piety and politics woven so tightly that pulling one thread makes the whole cloth move. The dragon helps with that exchange. On the gate, the Mushkhushshu announces that Babylon is not protected by soldiers alone. It is protected by a divine order strong enough to command the old frightening forces. For those inside the city, that could soothe. For those outside, it could warn. The same image does both, and that is why it is so efficient. A lion can warn. A bull can warn. But the dragon warns in a stranger voice. It says that the city has powers you may not fully understand. It says that the god of Babylon commands more than ordinary strength. It says that even the unnatural has a place here. This is also why comparison with other Mesopotamian beings helps. Think of the Lamassu, those great human-headed, winged guardians, massive and solemn, with the dignity of supernatural officials. They stand at entrances too, but they feel different. The Lamassu has intelligence in the face, architecture in the body, wings that speak of height and divine reach. It feels like a guardian with a mind. The Mushkhushshu feels less like an official and more like a sacred animal. Calder, leaner, more reptilian, less human. It does not reassure by looking wise. It reassures by looking aligned. It belongs to a god, and that belonging is its authority. A lion carries royal strength. A bull carries storm and force. The dragon carries something stranger. It stands partly outside the known world, though not so far outside that it becomes meaningless. It is not the enemy lying broken beneath the gods. It is the dangerous form that stands beside divine authority after danger has been mastered. This is the center of the creature. It is fear after arrangement. That phrase feels quiet, but it is heavy. Fear before arrangement is night without lamps. It is floodwater with no bank. It is a sound outside the door when no one is awake. Fear after arrangement is different. It is still fear, but it has a shape. It has a name. It has a boundary. It can be painted, carved, repeated, and given a place in the world. The Mushkhushshu is not there to erase dread. It turns dread into watchfulness. That may be why it remains strangely calming in a dark story. The creature is unsettling, yes, but it is not frantic. It does not leap from the wall. It does not shriek. It does not scatter the city in terror. It stands. It holds its form. It looks as if it has been standing for centuries, and as if another century would not trouble it greatly. There is sleep in that stillness. Not soft sleep, perhaps, but old sleep. The sleep of bricks cooling after day heat. The sleep of riverbanks under stars. The sleep of a city after ceremony, when sandals have stopped sounding on the processional way and the last smoke from offerings has thinned into the dark. Inside the story, this remaining matters. Human beings pass quickly. Even kings pass quickly, though they do their best to leave very large reminders. The workers who made the bricks passed. The priests who understood the rites passed. The visitors who looked up and felt small passed. The animal symbols stayed longer. The dragon watched them all disappear into time. This is why the Mushkhushshu belongs to dark history as much as mythology. It is not only a mythic creature. It is tied to real architecture, real empire, real labor, real political power, and real loss. It stood on a monument built by human hands inside a city that believed itself central, and the city itself eventually fell into silence. Every claim of order is temporary. That is the gentle sadness under the blue glaze. Babylon could shape fear, but it could not stop time. Marduk could be honored, But temples could be damaged. Kings could build, but later winds could move through their ruins. And still, the symbol survived. That survival is almost as mysterious as the creature itself. Not because the dragon was alive in a literal sense, but because meaning can sleep inside matter. A brick can hold the touch of an empire. A broken fragment can hold a whole gate in memory. A strange animal body can carry the emotional life of a civilization long after the civilization has changed beyond recognition. If you were standing in the ruins centuries later, you might not hear the festivals. You might not know where every wall once stood. You might see only mounds, fragments, dress, the long patience of dust. But somewhere beneath that dust, the dragon would still be waiting, not as a beast in a cave, but as an old idea preserved in clay. Fear had been given a body. Power had been given a sign. The city had placed its divine order at the threshold and trusted the image to speak. The fire near us is almost still now. A small red line glows beneath ash. The room is quiet enough that even thought seems to move more carefully. In the mind, Babylon darkens, and the gate becomes a shape against the stars. The dragon does not move. It does not need to. Its work is not motion. Its work is presence. And presence can last a very long time, even when the city around it begins, slowly, softly, to fall silent. The silence after Babylon is one of the deepest sounds in this story. It is not empty silence. It is filled with broken brick, vent, buried color, old names, and the faint memory of feet that no longer cross the processional way. A city can be loud for centuries, then become quiet enough for grass and dust to take turns speaking over it. Babylon, which once made such enormous claims about order, power, and divine nearness, also entered that long quiet. Its kings died. Its ceremonies changed. Its walls weakened. Its temples suffered time, conquest, neglect, rebuilding, forgetting, and the slow work of weather. No city escapes this. Some resist longer than others, and Babylon resisted in memory with unusual force. Even after its power faded, the name Babylon kept moving through stories, scriptures, histories, warnings, dreams, and accusation. It became more than a place. It became an image in the human mind, sometimes of splendor, sometimes of pride, sometimes of corruption, sometimes of lost greatness. The real city lay in earth and ruin, while the imagined city grew larger in distant minds. That is one of history's strange little jokes, though not a very cheerful one. A city can disappear physically while becoming louder symbolically. The bricks fall silent, and the name begins shouting across centuries. But the Mushkhushshu was not only a name, it was matter. It was glazed brick, color, shape, fragments. It remained tied to the body of the ruined city. Imagine the gate after the processions have ended. No festival dust. No priests in ordered movement. No king using architecture as prayer and announcement. The blue bricks break, fall, scatter, sink, Sand and soil move in. Fragments lie where no one pauses to read them. The dragon is no longer a complete animal in public light. It becomes pieces, a scale here, a curve there, a bit of leg, a color that does not belong to ordinary earth. Time is not dramatic as it works. It does not usually arrive with a trumpet. It works grain by grain. A wall edge softens. A brick loosens. A surface flakes. A path disappears because fewer feet remember it. One generation knows. The next guesses. The next tells a story. The next walks over the place without noticing. And yet, clay can be stubborn. Ancient brick has a quiet patience. It does not remember as a mind remembers, but it holds shape. It can wait under dirt for hands that have not yet been born. It can lose its city and still keep one piece of the city's face. In the 19th century and after, modern explorers and archaeologists came looking for Babylon. They came with ambition, scholarship, curiosity, imperial hunger, notebooks, tools, and all the complicated moods that travel with archaeology. Some came to understand. Some came to collect. Often, those motives were tangled together so tightly that even the people carrying them might not have separated them cleanly. Robert Colloway, a German archaeologist, led major excavations at Babylon beginning near the end of the 19th century. His work uncovered remains that helped the modern world see the city with new force, including the glazed brick fragments associated with the Ishtar Gate and processional way. It is difficult to overstate what that meant for the modern imagination. Babylon was no longer only a name in old texts. It had color again. Think of that moment softly, not as a grand announcement, but as hands in dust. A brush moves. Soil loosens. A surface appears, blue where blue should not be after so much burial. A piece of animal form emerges. The past does not return all at once. It returns in fragments, and fragments can be more haunting than whole things, because the mind has to complete what time has broken. A blue brick in the earth is a small miracle of survival. A dragon in pieces is even stranger. The creature that once told visitors that Babylon was under divine order now had to be reconstructed by people from another age, people with different gods, different empires, different museums, different ideas about ownership and memory. Fragments were studied, sorted, shipped, and eventually many were reconstructed in Berlin. There, inside a museum, the Ishtar Gate became one of the most famous ancient monuments in the world. It is beautiful. There is no honest way around that. The blue is still powerful. The rows of animals still move across the eye. The Mushkhushshu still catches attention with that same old ability to remain too strange for quick understanding. But beauty in a museum can be complicated. A reconstructed gate far from Babylon is both preservation and displacement. It allows people to see, learn, wonder, and feel the scale of ancient craft. It also raises questions about how pieces of the past were moved, who had power to move them, who tells the story, and where such objects belong. These questions do not need to be shouted to matter. They can sit quietly beside the glass, beside the labels, beside the footsteps of visitors. Dark history is often like that. It does not always need a battlefield. Sometimes it is a room where something magnificent stands far from home. If you walk through such a museum in imagination, the sound changes from city dust to indoor hush. There are no river winds, no festival drums, no animals shifting in pens outside the gate. There are polished floors, low voices, careful lighting, the faint fatigue of travelers, school groups trying to be quiet with mixed success, and someone standing alone before the dragon, feeling watched by a creature made thousands of years before their own worries began. The Mushkhushshu survives that change of setting better than one might expect. It is no longer guarding Babylon in any practical sense. It is no longer part of a living ritual system. Yet it still performs a kind of work. It still gathers the eye. It still asks what kind of world imagined it. It still carries the old message of fear made official, danger made sacred, animal form made into theology. This is where the modern question returns. Was it real? The safest answer is no, not as a literal dragon walking through the reeds of ancient Mesopotamia. We do not need a hidden population of horned serpent lions with bird talons to explain the image. The ancient artists had everything they needed in the animals around them and in the symbolic language of their world. Snakes were real. Lions were real. Birds of prey were real. Horns were sacred signs. Composite beings were familiar in Mesopotamian art and religion. But if someone asks whether it was real in another sense, the answer becomes more interesting. It was real as a sign, real as a presence on the gate, real as part of ritual and political imagination, real in the way a flag can be real, though cloth is only cloth until people agree that it carries a nation, real in the way a crown can be real, though metal is only metal until power gathers around it, real in the way a story can shape how people stand, nail, build, fear, and hope. The Mushkhushshu was real because Babylon made it matter. Some speculative ideas will always gather around such a creature. Maybe, some say, it preserves a memory of a large reptile. Maybe it was inspired by fossils. Maybe travelers brought tales of exotic animals. Maybe old encounters were reshaped until they became sacred form. Some of these possibilities are gentle and reasonable. Others run very far into the night and forget to bring a lamp. We cannot be sure of every influence. Ancient imagination was not a sealed box. Artists saw animals, heard stories, inherited symbols, and worked inside traditions we only partly understand. A fossil bone might stir wonder. A crocodile might lend shape to fear. A snake in a shrine might become more than a snake in memory. But possibility is not proof. The strongest answer remains symbolic. The dragon was made because the culture needed a body for a kind of power no ordinary animal could carry alone. That is more moving than a simple monster, at least to me. A literal dragon would be astonishing. Of course, it would cause difficulties for historians, biologists, and anyone in charge of livestock. But a symbolic dragon tells us something deeper about human beings. It tells us that people have always needed to take the forces that threaten them and place them into forms that can be faced. We cannot sleep beside shapeless fear. We can sleep beside a guarded gate. That may be the final gift of the Mushkhushshu as a sleep story. It begins as something unsettling. A long neck, a horned head, scales, lion paws, bird talons, a body that should not exist. But as the night deepens, the creature becomes less like a nightmare and more like an old answer. It says that fear can be shaped. It says that danger can be watched. It says that even the strange can be given a place. And once it has a place, it does not have to wander through the dark inside us. The ancient Babylonians did not live in a gentle world. No one really does. But theirs made uncertainty visible in floods, droughts, vars, omens, and divine moods. They built walls. They honored gods. They fired clay. They raised gates. They placed a dragon where people would cross from outside to inside, from dust to city, from ordinary road to sacred order. And now, after all the kings, all the ceremonies, all the labor, all the ruin, the dragon still remains in memory. Not because it burned cities, not because heroes slew it, not because it guarded gold in a mountain cave. It remains because it stood where myth, empire, art, and fear met each other. It remains because its body was made carefully enough to carry a civilization's idea of power. It remains because blue brick, once broken and buried, could still speak. If you listen closely, the story ends almost where it began. A gate in the dark, a creature on the wall, a river breathing somewhere beyond the city, dust cooling after heat, clay holding the shape of old hands, candlelight trembling in a modern room far away from Babylon. While the mind drifts between museum hush and ancient night, the Mushkhushshu is still watching, but softly now, not to frighten you awake, not to pull you back toward worry, only to stand at the edge of the story, long neck lifted, horn touched by darkness, guarding the threshold while the fire fades. Let the blue gate recede. Let the lions grow quiet. Let the bulls carry their storms away into sleep. Let the dragon remain where it belongs, not loose in the dark, but set into order. Passion, ancien, and still. Good night,